up there for you. Good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. Actually, it's probably good afternoon for most of you out there. It's about 11:30 right now. We're going on 11:30, talking about the delayed tariffs that are now impacting the economy, considering that most people are preparing for tariffs. This is creating the inflation expectation that is the self-fulfilling prophecy. Nothing has happened yet, but the people's reaction to the possibilities of what it is that's going to be taking place in the future is having a profound impact on the economy right now, and you are really seeing it. This is something that I have tried to describe many times in the past. The credible threat theory is alive and well, and if you have recognized it for what it is, considering what it is that we have described about the credible threat theory, you can see it playing out in real time right now. I mean, think about it. There is a delay on tariffs. Now, they have left the expectations open-ended, right? We don't know what it's going to be like here in the next 30 days and when the tariffs do kick in. We don't know to what extent. We don't know what it is that's taking place, but yet the people's reaction to what they know for sure, right, that is happening is creating a reality within the economy. Just think about some of the commentary that has taken place out there on what the tariffs are going to do to housing and causing housing prices to go up. People are now expecting this. They are seeing it. They are recognizing it within their own communities, their own markets, their own ideas, but yet nothing has happened yet. Isn't this amazing to see? So now if we take it back a little bit and try to understand why in the world would they do it like this? Like, why would they use the credible threats in order to guide the markets? It's because they use it so they don't have to use their actions, because they know that their actions are no longer the functioning tool that they used to be. It was the key monetary policy tool to adjust interest rates. But they found after they hit the lower bound of zero that it wasn't going to work anymore. They recognized this. They talked about it. Ben Bernanke gave a speech back in 2002 describing this exact moment when the Federal Reserve would run out of monetary policy through the adjustment of interest rates, and he said that's okay, they can use their words. He described it with the use of a gold machine, and how if they were to put out news of a guy who invents a gold machine who can produce as much gold at will with very little cost or energy, the moment that information got out to the public, the price of gold would plummet. They used that type of energy, that communication, that belief system into the markets in order to guide them. So think about what's happening right now. Even with the credible threat theory, when you apply that into what is happening right now, you can see it playing out. People's reactions to what it is that's going to happen is going to create an inflationary pressure. Now, with that inflationary pressure, what it's going to do is raise the neutral interest rate. This is important to understand because it was the low neutral interest rate when the Federal Reserve ran out of monetary policy, when they hit the lower bound of zero. That low neutral interest rate, lower bound of zero, left the monetary policy ineffective. But if they can raise the neutral interest rate, which is the rate that is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy, if they can raise the neutral interest rate, the Federal Reserve would regain their monetary policy through the adjustment of interest rates. But they have to raise that neutral interest rate. The only way to do it is with an elevated inflation expectation, creating the actual inflation within the economy. Think about what is happening right now with the credible threats of tariffs. It is creating an inflationary expectation that is going to create a reality of inflation, even if the tariffs doesn't happen. The credible threat of them happening is doing it. Now, most likely they will go through because they have to go through with the threat in order to maintain the credibility of it. But we don't know when that comes, what kind of exemptions, workarounds, what will happen from that. Right now, we were already supposed to be in the depths of tariffs, but yet it's been postponed, delayed, right? Now they have this open-ended communication. Oh, will we, won't we? How big will they be? How much? To what extent? Like, all these questions are now out there, and this is how they push the credible threats out there. Is they push it out and keep it open-ended. Even the threats of the Federal Reserve and their interest rate adjustments and their cutting. Will we? Won't we? Sometime here in the future, maybe out there at the second half of the year, right? Very open-ended communications. That way they can use their communication and the threat of what it is that they are going to do and guide the markets by doing that. But they have to leave it open-ended, very much like they're doing right now. See, if they really, really wanted to inflict these tariffs, just do it. Don't communicate about it. Just do it. Just all of us would wake up one day and all of a sudden, bam, they've been hit with tariffs and nobody got prepared for the situation. That's the way they should inflict tariffs. By communicating it well in advance like they do, they are wanting to push that information out there to guide the markets. That's why they do it to the extent that they are doing it. Once you recognize it, once you see it, it becomes pretty obvious. Once you realize that they are pushing the neutral interest rate higher so that the Federal Reserve doesn't have to do anything, they can sit on their hands, basically leave the Fed funds rate right where it's at, push the inflation expectation higher, raise the neutral interest rate to the Fed, or to the position that the Fed funds rate is sitting at today, and the Fed doesn't have to do anything. In fact, nobody had to do anything. Nothing had to happen. No tariff had to happen. No adjustment of interest rates had to happen. Nothing had to happen, and they achieved their goal because of the communications that they put out there to the market that elevated the inflation expectation through the threats of tariffs, the credible threats of tariffs. You see how this works? All right. I'm going to start reading some of these comments here. Pretty soon, almost every business will be exempt. Delay tariffs went into effect already. Are you not seeing that there was the 30-day delay on the Canadian and Mexican tariffs, right? Tariffs have already been hit on Canadian lumber 6 months ago. Nobody cared about them back then. I don't know why the hell they're all excited about them today. We're seeing lumber future prices dropping. It was at $650 something yesterday. We're at $630 today, right? That isn't causing the prices to go up. Tariffs on Canadian lumber was to prevent prices from being too cheap. Nobody communicates that out there, but that's exactly why all the tariffs in the history of time that have been put on Canada was to keep prices from being too low, right? Subsidized, cheap lumber being dumped into the United States, they were trying to prevent that from happening. That's what the tariffs were doing. Now, all of a sudden, here we have this 25% or a threat of a 25% tariff on all this lumber and all this stuff, and people all of a sudden losing their mind thinking that the price of a home, to build a home, is going to go up $30,000 or some crazy number. And I'm thinking, are these people just lost their mind? Do they not realize that the entire country of the United States has been in mill curtailments and slowdowns and inventory depletions for over a year? That the abundant amount of logs that actually exist within the United States does not give our forest industry the power to just ramp up production? The demand for logs overseas is so prevalent within our agricultural business of forestry, cutting down trees and sending them over to the other nations of the world, does not give our loggers the ability to then provide all the mills with the logs that they need at a price that is going to be profitable to them. Logging is not profitable to the people out here right now because the price of logs is too cheap. Opening up timber forestry doesn't make any sense. In some areas where there's a lot of restriction, I can see it. But unless you have a massive demand for logs that is outside of this nation, the loggers here in our country are not going to do well. The milling itself of lumber to provide for our own needs here is not enough to maintain the forest industry's logging and exporting of those logs. Right? We can't make up for it ourselves. So we definitely need the demand of foreign nations to buy our timber in order for our logging operations to be profitable. Just opening up land and saying, here, cut all this timber. Okay, that's great. Do you mind explaining how it is that we are going to have logging operations that are going to be profitable that you can go and do that with? If there isn't a demand for logs outside of this nation, the moment that China cuts us off, we're going to have an abundant amount of logs here. We don't need to open up any timberland. I don't know how many people see it that way. Very few. Very few people. It's not just lumber. Why prices will go up. Many materials and labor costs will go up. That's why raised prices on home construction. Why? Because of tariffs? Most of that stuff is domestically supplied. All this like idea that Mexican gypsum is all of a sudden going to cause the wallboard prices to go through the roof is absolutely asinine, considering that the majority of wallboard is produced right here in the United States. Is there wallboard that's made in China? Yes. Is there wallboard made in Mexico? Yes. Does it get imported to the United States? Yes. Could we supply all the wallboard that we could ever possibly use here in the United States for ourselves and deny the Chinese and Mexican wallboard? Absolutely, we could. Could we make it cheaper by importing these Chinese and Mexican wallboard? Yeah, competition, foreign competition, you bet. But it doesn't mean that we can't supply all the wallboard and gypsum that we need right here in the United States. We don't need Mexican gypsum. We don't need Canadian lumber. Does it make it more affordable? Does it make it more efficient? Does it make it an easier product to distribute out there to the rest of the world? Absolutely it does. Everybody working in combination, in coordination, does make it more efficient, makes it cheaper. Do we absolutely have to have these other nations in order to find all the building supplies that we need for ourselves? No, we don't need them. When it comes to the amenities like the fixtures, the light fixtures, the plumbing fixtures, those type of things, yeah, right? A lot of that stuff is coming out of China, but the actual building material is domestically made. All the windows, all the doors, all the siding, all the lumber, all the plywood, all the roofing, all that stuff, all the concrete, all the steel, all the hardware to put all those buildings together is domestically made and sourced out. Can it come from other places? Absolutely. Nails? Like we sell more Chinese-made nails than just about any other nails out there. Is there American-made nails? Absolutely. Are they high quality? Sure they are. Are they expensive? Yep. Right? But can we do it? You bet we could. Doesn't mean it's going to be an awesome time. Right? But all that stuff is domestically sourced. And like, can it come from other nations? Yeah, sure it can. But it's not like we absolutely have to have it, not for building materials. All right, do you have a hammer Chinese nails in backwards? No, they just kind of do it all by themselves. All right, so many say that the effects of tariffs is to create American jobs, but wouldn't it take years to get out of globalization? Here's the problem, is that it's to make American jobs, but it's not. The tale goes back so far, right? The story goes back so far that it's going to be very difficult to wrap your head around the idea that you can't just bring American jobs back, because the problem that we are facing here really has to be understood from the Cantillon effect, is that we have raised our standard of living to a level that is no longer competitive to the people outside the nation. Basically, there's people outside the nation who are going to do the same job for a hell of a lot less than what we are willing to do it for. All right, so if we put these tariffs on these products and say, hey man, they're elevated up in price, now we here in the United States can produce it for ourselves because it's so much more expensive to bring in these foreign imports because of the tariffs, that now we can create jobs within the United States that produces those particular products that is now going to be competitive, right? So this is kind of the idea behind it all. Here's the problem that we face with that, is that it's going to take ever increasing amounts of tariffs and subsidies in order to maintain that, because it's not the natural force. It's going against the natural force. The natural forces is of equilibrium, saying distribution, manufacturing goes to the cheapest producers and distributors. So once we, as the United States, had elevated our standard of living because we had produced all the world's greatest products, distributed those products out there to the rest of the rest of the world sent us their money, we elevated our standard of living, and now the foreign production is going to be more competitive than what we can produce ourselves because of our elevated standard of living. Can we prevent that from happening? Bring manufacturing back? Absolutely. You can attempt to do it, but it's going to take ever increasing amounts of government intervention to make it happen. Now you are reliant upon the government to maintain tariffs and subsidies in order for you to have a job. Does this sound like a pleasant place to be? Does this sound like it's going to be comfortable having to be at the, basically at the suffering of decision making given by politicians on whether or not they are going to continue to tariff and subsidize so that you can have your good manufacturing job here in the United States that typically would not exist if it wasn't for this effort? You see what's happened here? Like, this isn't, you can bring them back, but it's not going to be something that is economically sustainable without ever increasing amounts of government intervention. Like, I want government out of my life. I don't want to incorporate them into my life. I certainly don't want to incorporate them into my life to say, hey, your way of life only exists so long as they continue to exist in the way that they are doing it by subsidizing and tariffing. Like, that puts you in a compromised position. It puts everybody in a compromised position. All right. How about if they get rid of income tax and also at the same time wandering? It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference because it's all about the new money. So long as the United States is continuing into the debt issuance, creating more debt, right? You know, if the United States debt clock.org, if that debt number is continuing to rise, then what you are having is new money coming into the system. I don't care if you take away the taxes. I don't care if you subsidize. I don't care about any of that stuff. Like, I care about it. What I'm saying is that I don't care if you are going to continue to do that, then you will create inequality. Guaranteed. I don't care if you take all that money and just give it right to the poor. The poor will spend it, use it in a way that separates them, or will force the separation by the rich getting richer, because essentially what they will do is behave in a way that causes that money to funnel right up to the top. Right? So any new money that comes into the system will create inequality. I don't care if you cut back on the taxes, right? Again, that's new money coming into people's pockets. They spend it in such a way that it causes the inequality to continue. There is no way of bringing new money in and then getting everybody to behave properly with that. And what I mean by properly is being producer saver mentality, because we're not in a producer saver mentality economy. We're in a debtor consumer economy. So if they are not pushing debt and consumerism, then they're not doing it, right? They're not going to push that, because that's what they're looking for, is to produce a consumer. And the only way to produce a consumer is to put new money in their hand. Every time you put new money in their hand, you have more inequality. You have more separation between the rich and the poor. There's nothing you can do to change it, except for pain and misery, right? Pain and misery means that you cut back on your expenses, you take out no more debt, you pay off debt, you take any profit that you get and you do not buy into luxuries, you reinvest that back into production and savings. You do this for generation upon generations, right? It isn't going to happen. I mean, it's just not going to be that way. All right, Uneducated Engineer, love the name, man. $2. Thank you so much for the support. Here, UE, this is for you. 7th coffee of the day. I appreciate it, man, because, yeah, it's about the 7th one, too, I tell you. All right. Pour water into the shallow end, it ends up in the deep end. Yeah, that's right. 7th coffee, more like 7th brew. All right. All right. Thank you for joining the channel too there, Uneducated Engineer. And I see Deja, I think, had also re-upped her membership. Thank you so much for for being a member of the channel. And for those of you who are not quite aware of the membership-only videos that we have done for the Uneducated Economist, where we break down monetary speeches coming from the Federal Reserve, talking about the monetary policy, breaking down the credible threat theory, doing it in detail, and describing these things in a way that the average everyday person can understand. It is probably one of the best dollars that you could ever possibly spend, considering how much information that you're going to get from it. It's $12 a year, $120 a decade for some of the best information that you could ever possibly find, with a community of people who are very much like-minded, trying to break this stuff down and understand it in a way that then we can use this information for ourselves to make the best decisions for ourselves, because we know that each and every single one of us has our own economy to deal with. The economy as a whole, yeah, there's a big picture to look at, but each and every single one of us has to interact with the economy in a way that is going to be unique and different to every one of us. How much debt we have, what our goals are in the future, what age we are. If you're 18 years old trying to figure out what it is you need to do with your life, and if you're 80 years old trying to figure out how you're going to hold on to your retirement for the rest of your life, two very different decisions that you're going to be making, yet we are all interacting in the same economy. I started watching this a few months ago. This guy is good. I appreciate it, Joe, and I really appreciate you sticking around for a few months to see how things played out. You know, I mean, I know the credible threat theory is the best one out there. I know that there is other people out there who could take the information that I have found and then deliver it in a way that is far superior to me. I know this. I don't know why it is that nobody else is picking up on it, but whatever. If they don't do it, we're unique. We're the ones who have the information. 338 people right now who are watching and talking about this stuff are the only people who are really internalizing this stuff in a way that they can now use it. Everybody else is losing their mind. Think about it. Look at all the people who are absolutely losing their mind over the idea of something that hasn't happened yet. All right? Think about all the decisions that they are making right now over something that has yet to occur. Think about how it is that the Federal Reserve was wishing and hoping and dreaming and praying for this exact thing to be taking place. That they could sit on their hands, the government could sit on their hands, use their words to guide the markets into an elevated inflation that can then raise the neutral interest rate and put it right in the position that they were hoping for, where they are no longer having to adjust the Fed funds rate to achieve neutral. Neutral finds them. It's occurring. It's taking place right now. But nobody really sees it. Right? Nobody sees it that way. Everybody sees all kinds of Armageddon crisis situations and stuff, which, you know, I mean, very well could play out, especially if you positioned yourself in that way. Right? There's a lot of people out there who might be positioned in life that very much could be taking a beating here going into the future because of, you know, the way that they feel and believe and the position that they have taken. I don't feel that way. Like, you know, regardless of what happens out there, I feel like I'm in a position that I would be able to tolerate and deal with just about anything that's going on. Even a complete collapse of the dollar. Right? Like, none of that stuff scares me at all. Like, I have zero fear. You know, zero fear of the World Economic Forum, of the BRICS nations, of any of the damn New World Order stuff. Like, none of that stuff. I don't fear any of it. Like, I have very little concern about that stuff. My concern is more about understanding the information so that I can make the best decision for myself. That's my major concern. No fear equals freedom. Absolutely it does. You know? All right, way more complicated than that all-nighter, but go ahead and buy into the talking points. Yeah. I don't know, Joseph. Okay. UE Gammon second. Right on, deja vu. Oh, I see, number one. UE number one, Gammon second. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, Tony. Ask the farmers what happened in Trump's first term without stupidities. They'd be a lot of less farmers right now. Until the price of labor rises, nothing will change, Simon. You know that. Labor price, it doesn't matter, man. Like, whatever. Labor prices up, down, or sideways isn't going to make any difference, because you're not going to slow down the inequality that is taking place. Whether you have, I mean, don't get me wrong, high labor prices would definitely help out the majority of the people out there where they get that money coming in. But ultimately, what it's going to do is just level the playing field again, and they'll be in the right back in the exact same position that they are in today, considering that if everybody gets the new money in, they're all going to start deploying that money back into the economy in the same channels that they were before, and it's going to start raising the prices of everything because that's how inflation works. So raising the labor prices of everything, raising the labor, getting more income isn't going to help. It's not going to help. What's going to help is stop diving into luxuries, period. End of story. That's it. That's the only thing that can be done, is the people literally have to say, I am not buying new cars. I am not buying new clothes. I am not going and buying ribeyes. I am not going and buying all this other stuff that now shows what would be typically experienced as a luxury. Getting out of all that stuff will then create a situation in which that the lower end people will have an opportunity to start rising back up into the middle class. But so long as people who have the money dive into luxuries, there will be a separation between the rich and the poor every single time, no matter what you do. No matter what. It doesn't matter how you do it. Labor prices, giving it away, UBI, taxing the rich and saying, we're going to redistribute it back out to the poor or whatever. Same back thing, right? Take it from the rich, right back up to them again. Separation, inequality takes place. The only way to do it is to, again, increase the amount of production and savings. Do not buy nothing new. Reuse everything. Cut back on foreign, imports. All the other stuff that people aren't going to do, right? You can't fix it. I know you can't. A lot of welfare assistance entitles most people to similar luxuries. That's a luxury, straight up. Welfare assistance is a luxury. I don't care how you I understand for some people, they might look at their life and say, dude, I am not living a luxurious life. Right? And I get that part. That's I understand that's the case for an individual person, but they also have to understand that the fact that there is a welfare system, the fact that there's a guy sitting on a bench over here with a cell phone who's homeless, drinking a beer, that is a luxurious experience, because you consider what it is to be poor in some other nations. They actually live in some serious poverty. They don't get cell phones and beers. Right? Because even being homeless in the United States is a luxurious experience, surprisingly, right? I have a company for minerals. We deal with foreign entities, and we must price this threats. Yeah? You're pricing in the threats. I know, because it works. Raising the inflation. The Federal Reserve wants an inflation expectation that is elevated. They have said it so many times that they are looking for inflation. What is it? Inflation targeting, they want inflation moderately above 2% for some time. It's called flexible average inflation targeting. And they have stated this over and over and over again. And yet every single mainstream media article and economist and everybody out there says, well, when the Federal Reserve gets to a 2% target, they have no 2% target. There is no 2% target. They're going from moderately above 2% for some time with no mathematical formula for figuring it out. So 99% of the people out there who are thinking that the Federal Reserve is going for 2% have got it wrong. Have got everything that they are thinking about, imagining, believing, and strategizing on wrong. 100% wrong, because they look at a 2% target as opposed to a moderately above 2% for some time with no mathematical formula to figure it out, because what they are truly trying to do is get a 2% average inflation rate over time. Right? To make up for the fact that they failed to achieve the 2% target over the previous 10 years. They know, I don't know how many times that I have said this over and over and over again, and the Federal Reserve has said it over and over and over again inside of their speeches that they communicate to each other with, but never, ever, ever do you see that on the mainstream media. Never. Not one single Federal Reserve official who has said these things inside of their speeches to each other has ever come out on a mainstream media channel and says, no, the Federal Reserve is not going for a 2% target. They are going for 2% average inflation rate over time, which means that appropriate monetary policy will seek to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. Right? Never do you see that. And because of that, 99% of the people got it wrong because they are using the Federal Reserve, the government, are using credible threats to guide the markets. I don't know, I cannot explain this any more than I do. This is how they conduct themselves. Everybody else has got it wrong. Everybody, literally everybody. And I don't mean to be arrogant sounding or cocky or anything else like that. I wish other people would take up this information and then deliver it back out there because I know they could do it so much better than I could. Right? I mean, I'm just some dude sitting in a car breaking this stuff down, but I know I got this right. I know I got it right because they keep reiterating it over and over and over again inside of their speeches, but yet they do not communicate it out there to the mainstream media. They do communicate how it is within their own talks that they will use the mainstream media to deliver specific sentences to adjust asset prices. They have said that within their speeches. Philip Jefferson, just recently in his speech, just 2 weeks ago, said that exact thing. That they know that the market is listening for specific sentences coming from the Federal Reserve that will move the asset prices one direction or the other. They can literally change asset prices with their words by delivering it appropriately through the propagandized media. It's you can't even make this stuff up. This is how they're doing it. You know? All right, $5 from Tom Flo. Wasn't there a period of U.S. history where there was no inflation prior to 1913? Is inflation a game they play? Okay, so we have to understand inflation existed. Okay, if Cantillon can describe inflation from 200 and something plus years ago, right? So it's not just the government, it's not just the money printer, it's not just a phenomenon, right? Because if Cantillon can describe price increases from 200 and something years ago, before central banking systems, before all that other stuff, then we have to understand that inflation is not necessarily the money printer go burr. It's not necessarily devaluation of dollars. The simple statement is easy, right? I mean, it's easy for us to say, oh no, money printer go burr, prices go down or go up, dollar value go down, all this other stuff, and then ignore why it's taken place. Then ignore the fact that quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 that took the Fed's balance sheet from $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion failed to produce the inflationary scenario that the Fed was looking for. What causes inflation? Inflation is due to supply-demand imbalances. When prices go up, it's because the demand is exceeding the supply. That's it. Okay? Now, can you have new money coming into the system that then gets redistributed throughout the people, which then causes the money velocity to increase as people are spending that money into it? Absolutely. Absolutely, that can happen. Think about how that money has to come in through all channels at once. If all of a sudden everybody had access to the money at the exact same time, then they would all go out there and they would start increasing their expenditures. They would all start enjoying more steaks. They would go out there and enjoy the concerts. They would out there and enjoy all kinds of stuff. But how many of those people with all that added new money would go out there and start loading up on toilet paper? Do you think that there would all of a sudden be an increase in the demand for toilet paper because all of a sudden everybody just got a $100 bill put in their pocket? Probably not. But would the demand for ribeyes down at the restaurant go up? Probably. Right? Because of how that money enters all the channels at once. It's not going to go flowing into toilet paper. People are already buying toilet paper. They got the toilet paper they need. There is not going to be an increase in demand for toilet paper because all of a sudden everybody has an extra $100 bill in their pocket. But there will be an increase for the demand for ribeyes. Right? So understanding how this operates. If you all of a sudden just start creating a bunch of money, but it's sitting in there in the banking system, and the only way you can really get that money out into the economy is by lending that money out there into the economy, that is going to be a very limited access to that money and what channels it actually flows into. This is one of the reasons why quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 failed to produce the inflationary scenario the Fed was looking for. It created an inflationary expectation that definitely raised inflation for a moment, but the reality of the situation is that most of that money ended up staying locked up in the banking system, and without it being lent into the system, or without people borrowing it into the system, it doesn't start chasing goods and services, and it certainly doesn't enter all channels at once. Now, if you put out a stimulus check and you hand everybody a bunch of money all at the same time, and then you sever the supply chain and say, don't go to work, don't distribute, don't manufacture, and here's a bunch of money, go clear out all the shelves, all of a sudden everybody has access to money and they're all entering in at the same time, entering all these different channels. Well, again, guess what? Right? You're going to have supply-demand imbalances on account of that, and you're going to start seeing inflation in everything out there, except some of the things that reestablished their distribution and manufacturing, like lumber. So when lumber was running up to $1,700 per thousand, and everybody says money printer go burr, prices go up, lumber's the proof and evidence of it, I was the one person saying, nah, supply chain breakdown, you're going to see that stuff come right back down to normal. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened because of my understanding of macroeconomics and how it is that inflation actually is created within the economy, because it's not necessarily dollar devaluation as much as it is supply-demand imbalances. Lumber, oil, silver, they're all sitting far below their all-time highs. In fact, most commodities, all commodities, they're pretty much under their all-time highs. Okay. Did we really pull that much money out of the system with this quantitative tightening? No, not really. All that money that was printed is essentially still there, but is it creating the inflation that we had thought, the hyperinflation scenario? No, not even. What's going to create inflation? Oh, tariffs, right? A new form of inflation threat. Just in line with what it is that the Federal Reserve was needing, that they had described literally 20 years ago, preventing deflation, doing everything that they can, how to create an inflationary scenario. Even John Williams, in his speech, Monetary Policy Strategies for a Low Neutral Interest Rate World, given November 20th of 2018, stated that the monetary policy of the Federal Reserve was seeking to achieve a higher inflation due to the fact that they had a low neutral interest rate. They said, today's monetary policy faces an altogether different set of problems stemming from a very low neutral interest rate. That is the interest rate that is consistent with an economy operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation. Ironically, the problem we need to solve is an inflation expectation that is persistently too low rather than too high. Those are the exact words that John Williams gave in his speech. I've said them so many times now that I practically in fact, I have memorized it. And knowing that that's what the Federal Reserve was seeking back in 2018, when it started kicking in during COVID, I thought, damn, is this not the greatest gift in the world to the Federal Reserve? Every single person who is now falling into the hyperinflation expectations, elevated inflation expectations, is literally giving a gift to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is like, man, we did it. We got the elevated inflation expectation. We got the elevated inflation, exactly what it is we needed, very much in line with what John Williams was saying back in 2018 that the Federal Reserve was needing. And here it is, absolutely right in line with what it is that the Federal Reserve was looking for, and everybody thinks they screwed up. You know, I am literally the only one who said, dang, they actually pulled it off. They did exactly what they said that they were going to do all the way back from 2002. Did they play this thing out exactly the way they said that they were going to do it? And now, since everybody thinks they screwed up, they continue to operate and win. Right? It's like if everybody was to take into credible threat theory and understand it, the Federal Reserve would fail to exist the way they're doing it. It would have to be something completely different from what they are doing. Okay. But because everybody thinks it's screwed up and trying to get to a 2% target, the Federal Reserve continues to operate and win. They are literally pulling the wool over every single person's eyes, and they successfully did it. You know, I don't know how the hell they get it. Like, I mean, objectified definitions, and we can communicate without that foundation. Words are lost in translation. Absolutely, all-nighter. What did the Fed say in 2002? There's a great speech. Well, how much time do I have, guys? Oh, okay, man. These things go by so fast. Like, it literally feels like I started the video just 5-10 minutes ago, and here it is almost 40 minutes into it. Back in 2002, there's a great speech given by Ben Bernanke called Deflation and How to Prevent It from Ever Occurring here. Now, if you want, you can go and become a member of the channel where we have broke down that speech word for word. We have, like, did the entire thing. But go and read the speech for yourself. It's an excellent speech talking about how it is that the Federal Reserve is in fear of deflation. They scared shitless of it. But inflation, no, that's the thing that they want. They want inflation. Like, inflation is the good thing that they have. See, most people don't understand the fact that when you have a very low interest rate, it's actually deflationary to the economy. See, the return on capital investment ends up going negative, and this is really difficult for a lot of people to understand. But when you have interest rates incredibly low, it will not create an inflationary scenario, but creates a deflationary scenario. Dr. Lacey Hunt really describes this well. If you can imagine inheriting $1 million back in the early 80s, back when interest rates were quite elevated, you could take your $1 million that your rich uncle left you, you could go and put it towards U.S. government debt. You buy 10-year treasuries, you get a return of like $150,000 a year. Back in the early 80s, that would have been a hell of a return. You take that $150,000, you can spend a lot into the economy, buying houses and cars and going on vacation. These elevated interest rates had a great return on capital investment, which could then be turned back into the economy inside of production and purchasing and commerce or whatever. Now, if you take it fast forward to today, here we are, we got the 10-year trading at like what, 4%, 4.5% or something of that nature, wherever it's at today. You gave your rich uncle leaves you $1 million, you take your $1 million, you put it towards the 10-year treasury, you're getting something like $45,000 a year. That's not a lot. Like, it's a lot, don't get me wrong, $40,000 a lot of money, but $40,000 a year today comparatively to $150,000 a year back in the early 80s, you can see how the return on capital investment is quite low. Well, take that 10-year treasury that's paying 4.5% and take it down to 2 or 1%. Now you got a return of $10,000, $20,000 off of $1 million investment. The return on capital investment is so low that it doesn't even beat inflation. In fact, inflation probably outpaces it, and therefore your return on capital investment has a negative purchasing power even though it had a positive return. So this is a deflationary expectation or deflationary scenario that would happen with a low interest rate environment. And this is what we were facing for the previous 10 years prior to COVID. Okay? The Fed knew this. Everybody, like all the economists, all the bankers, all the people within the Fed's monetary policy strategy team, the communications within their speeches, was talking about how scary of a moment this was going to be. That they were going to fail to be able to stimulate the economy with the adjustment of interest rates. By lowering interest rates, they were not going to be able to get the economy moving again. They knew this. They were failing. But they said, that's okay. We got something else that we can totally use. Let me describe the gold machine. Right? And we can put the fear out there into the people in such a way that they will then conduct themselves as if it had already happened. Think about like how it is that the Federal Reserve had done nothing at the end of 2023, communicated about how they were going to go into all these interest rate cuts, like 7, 8, 9 interest rate cuts going into 2024. That expectation started lowering the mortgage rates. Before the Federal Reserve did anything, the mortgage rates were coming down in a very dramatic, in a very pronounced fashion. The moment that the Federal Reserve said that, hey, we're cutting rates, mortgage rates started moving up the other direction. They literally went the opposite way of the Federal Reserve's action. And the reason is because of the way that they delivered the information. See, before they were delivering information saying, hey, we're going to cut throughout 2024 because we feel that the appropriate position for the Fed funds rate would be a lower position considering the inflation expectation that we have going right now. People were not in fear of the economy. They thought that it was going to be a good thing. Because they thought it was a good thing and because they thought that they had achieved their goals or whatever it was, the market believed that this was a good position that was happening within the economy and started lowering mortgage rates. The moment that the Fed cut, they cut because they felt that there was problems, weakening, some kind of issues happening within the labor market, and the market got pissed about that and says, oh no, if that's the case, if you're going to deliver information that says, hey, you got a weakening economy, then we are going to demand a higher return for our investment. And you started seeing mortgage rates go up because the market was going to demand that. Not the people saying, hey, I demand a mortgage with a higher rate. The investors who buy mortgage-backed securities saying, I am not going to deploy my money unless you give me a bigger return. Not with a weakening economy, considering what the Federal Reserve just said. They are guiding this through their words. I see it. Like, I can see it. Right? And it's very difficult because I had to change my entire belief system on how it is that the Federal Reserve conducts themselves. But I was able to do that through the reading of their own words, through their speeches that says, hey, we cannot conduct ourselves the way we used to. The monetary adjustments through the interest rates doesn't work. We have to do it through communications. They have extensively talked about this. But again, it's very difficult because there is no book, there's no video, there's nobody out there who's going to explain this in detail like I have done. Literally, you have to piece this information together. Or come to the Uneducated Economist, where I have tried my best to try and group it all together, you know. All right. Game Shark, thank you so much for joining the channel. You're really going to enjoy those things. All right. Bitcoin, not crypto, silly. Okay, 4.5% rates would be cool, but prices would have to drop. Only the rich can play. Alrighty guys, this was fun. I really enjoyed the live stream. You guys are so awesome for hanging out this entire time. This theory makes complete sense. Yeah, thank you, Janine. Thank you so much for that. And it does. Like, once you understand it, once you have internalized it and you see it, right? And because it takes a while. Like, I understand. This is like, you literally have to change your belief system. You have to change everything that you understood about the Federal Reserve, and you have to change everything you understood about the government and how it is that they are interacting with the banking system. But once you do, then you can see through their own communications. This isn't me like making this stuff up. This is them saying this straight up to each other, not to the mainstream media, not to the press, not to any of that stuff. Right? These are communications to each other that they are doing, that we here on the Uneducated Economist, for whatever reason, have discovered and broken down these speeches in this language and this communication to now realize that they are now conducting themselves in a way that nobody else sees. It's so amazing. But we're doing it. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.